Hello, welcome to Enlightened Empaths with Samantha and Denise, your community for the spiritually awakened. This week we're going to be discussing mediumship, the history of mediums, the different types of mediumship out there, and different ways that you can explore if you yourself are a medium. Denise, when did you know you were a medium?
I would say when I was a little tiny girl, but I never really validated it until my late teens, early 20s, because it was scary. It was really scary, and even growing up in a family that was open to that, it's that I think, and this is valid for a lot of people that may have children that are highly sensitive to spirit, is the middle of the night stuff can be very, very overwhelming for little kids. But it really hit gangbusters for me late teens, early 20s, which is a normal time for all of this to wake up. And then again, probably 10 to 12 years ago, it was like the floodgates opened. Not in the Long Island medium kind of way where I can't imagine what it's like to live with the constant barrage from spirit. I truly, I think being able to turn it on and off is so, so important. How about yourself?
I totally agree. Being able to turn it off is really important. I I never knew I was a medium for a long time. I just thought I was a weird kid that, saw discarnate beings at night in my room, which is why I always slept with the light on. And it wasn't until I started going to psychic or intuitive development classes. And every time they would put one person in the middle to get messages for that person. And usually the person would say, like, what's coming up with my job, or what do I need to know about my marriage, or, psychic type questions. I would always get information from their loved ones on the other side. And that's how I learned what I was. But it was, I don't know, it always felt unsettling and strange.
Mm-hmm.
I have to tell you a really weird experience I had just the other day with my daughter. And this just is a little window into what it's like to walk the weird path. We went into this bakery that we go into, unfortunately, at least once a week. It's the best bakery in town. So most of them know me in there, and there's a new guy who was just bubbling over with joy and enthusiasm. And he was like, "Hi, how are you guys doing? What can I get you today?" He was just the happiest darn worker I've ever seen. And I smiled and I said, "Wow, what a nice welcome." So I'm talking to him, and he's talking to me, and he is just chatty, chatty, chatty. And he said, "So it's so lovely that you don't have to work on this beautiful Friday." And I said, "Actually, I'm stopping into the bakery and bringing these home to my children, and then I have to lock myself in my office and work the rest of the day. So this is my little treat to not feel guilty for doing that to my kids on their summer." And he said, "Oh, what do you do for a living?" And I paused, and I just didn't want to go down that hole, So I said, "Oh, I work as a freelance writer and podcaster," which is true.
Yes, it
And
is.
he said, "Oh, what do you write about?" And I said, "Oh, I write about spirituality, intuition, energy, meditation." He shut down. Like the bubbliness, the joy just drained from his face.
Aw.
And he goes, "Oh, okay. Anything else I can get you?" And I said, "No, that's all. Thank you." And he said, "Okay." And he told me how much it would be, and I paid him. And he didn't even say goodbye. And I just took my box and I walked out. And my daughter Tori, when we got in the car, she said, "Wow, Mom, now I understand why you don't tell people what you do."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that was this just a few days ago?
Yeah.
Okay, that is so weird because I went to meet an old friend for lunch. I told you about that, the shaman lady.
Mhm. Mhm.
We were sitting there, and then I looked, and a man that I've worked with and his wife were a couple booths over in this little tiny place. And I did this, and then I stopped, and because I had just resigned from my position, and really incredibly nice man. I've known his wife. She's, I'm not going to give too many details, but she's in the same field that I am with education. So I've worked with her for years. And so they said, "Oh, happy retirement." I said, "Well, not really." This is what the woman said. And I said, "No, I'm just going to really focus on my business." And she said, "Well, what's your business?" And I hesitated. I said, "Oh, I'm a consultant." "Well, what do you do consulting for?" And then I almost started to go into the whole spiel. And then I said, "You know what? I'm a medium. That's what I do. I talk to dead people. all over the world. And I do a podcast and I have a dear friend that I do this with, and they just both like literally their mouths hung open. And this man, who is one of the kindest people you'd ever want to meet, he said, never would have guessed it. And I said, no. And she's just like bubbling over, oh my God, isn't that so cool? And blah. But just that vulnerability, and you never know how people are going to react. And so you tie in which is not the most mainstream thing to say that you do. And
Right.
then add in being an empath on top of that, which kind of goes hand in hand. And that, I think our default position, for me anyway, and you and I have talked about this a lot, is I just want to be kind of invisible in the background, be of service. I don't want to be out there. So put ourselves out there is really, I guess vulnerable is the only word I can really use for that.
Right. No, I agree. The response that I usually get is either, it's very black and white. It's either, oh my gosh, that's amazing. What can you do for me? Read me, which is its own kind of weirdness.
Yes.
Or I get that born again type of response I got a couple of days ago at the bakery of, oh my gosh, you're evil. I'm not even going to talk to you because you scare the crap out of me.
And it hurts. It hurts.
It does.
Because we're nice people. My own personal view, and we've talked about this, is I believe in a higher power. What you can use whatever label name you want, but I feel like everything that I bring through is coming from that place. I'm not cavorting with the devil.
Well, I've had people ask me that, and I've said to them, if what I am doing is cavorting with the devil, he works really slow, because I've been doing this for over a decade, and not one negative, mean, or cruel message has come through in a reading. No client has ever walked away going, holy cow, after a reading, all this bad stuff started to happen. Right. I said, so if this is working with Satan, do you remember Church Lady from Saturday Night Live?
Yes.
He is incredibly patient with getting his evil stuff out there, because only good has come from this. And I was explaining that to my girls the other day. We were up in the mountains, and I always feel, I don't know, so much closer to the whole world of spirit when I'm in the mountains. And we were talking about the work I do a little bit, and one of my daughters said, what's your favorite part about doing the work you do? And I said, I always have a hard time answering that, because I feel like anything I say sounds kind of braggy, which I hate. So I said, none of this is from me or because of me, but my favorite part of the work is literally the lives that are saved as a result of this. I've had several clients email to tell me, after the death of my child or after the death of my spouse, I was seriously considering suicide until I had validation that they were okay from you, and thank you, I'm going to stay. And as my kids would say, those are mic drop moments where you're like, okay, I'm done, I'm out, I check it off, I've done my good. You just feel so like, I don't know, fulfilled and amazed and connected, and it's such an honor.
Yes.
I had this one client, it was one of my favorite readings ever. He and his wife had come to see me for years, and one time he brought his mom in, who's from Italy, and didn't speak a word of English. So his wife sat in on the reading to translate. But I know you're good with group readings, Denise. I'm not. I like a one-on-one reading. I'm much more comfortable with that. And I'm not comfortable passing on readings and waiting for someone to translate it, because when I am connecting with spirit, it goes so fast. I have to speak really, really fast. But I did it. And I won't go into all the long details because it would take too much time. But the end of the result, the woman who was from Italy, she had not spoken to her sister in 30 years because of a fight they had over their parents' estate. And both parents came through with messages explaining why things were left the way they were in the will. And this woman left my office in tears, and the son emailed me a week later. I still have the email. And he said, just want you to know that for the first time in 30 years, I am flying my mother home to Italy and she is spending the month with her sister.
Oh,
Like, stuff like that is miraculous.
right.
And it's worth those moments where we feel weird and vulnerable and different,
And that's,
right?
it's so humbling to be that liaison between someone in spirit and the person in front of you, or the person on the phone or Skype or whatever, just to be that channel or to be that connection. I did the same thing the other day. I emailed someone after I had talked to them, and I said, I really hope I didn't sound braggy about how well things are going. And she emailed back and she said, oh no, I know you're doing this for the right reason. This isn't about you, it's about how you can help people. And I think you and I are both in the same place with that. This is about how can I be of service, which seems like a key part for mediums who really do make that connection. So folks who are listening that are thinking, oh, I want to be on the big stage, also try to work in that part of how am I going to help people heal.
Yes, exactly. Well, let's start our mediumship discussion with a little bit of history, just so people listening to this who might not be so familiar with the world of mediumship understand that this is not weird and that it has been going on for ages. One of the things that I found most shocking is that many historians believe the practice of mediumship dates back at least 50,000 years. We even have a cave drawing in France that they have dated to 13,000 BC. It's called The Sorcerer. And it shows a man in the skins of a stag wearing a mask of antlers. And he's thought to be channeling or praying to the god of the hunters. So the idea of connecting to spirit is really ancient. I'm sure everyone has heard about things like the oracle at Delphi, where, many prominent men and women of ancient Greece would consult women who were able to speak to the gods and goddesses for information about what was coming down the pike in the future and to connect them with loved ones who have passed on. We have the ancient Egyptian Book of the Dead. We have the Tibetan Book of the Dead that actually teaches you how to die and connect with the world of spirit at the end of your life, and how to help people die and pass on and connect with the world of spirit. So it's very ancient. We have everyone, I am sure, well, every Christian at least, I'm sure, has heard about the Witch of Endor from the Bible. But I want to give a little bit more of that story for any Catholics like me who don't exactly always read the Bible. As you know, most Catholics are trained not to read the Bible, but the Catechism. Now, in the Bible, we have Samuel, who was actually called back in his day the boy medium. His mom, Hannah, could not conceive, and she prayed all the time and promised God that if he granted her with a boy, she would take him to Eli, a priest, so he could be raised in the temple. And the story says that God obliged, and she gave birth to a boy and named him Samuel, which I think means he who listens to God. When he was living with Eli as a young boy, he was awoken one night by hearing his name called 3 times. And it freaked him out, as it would. You're laying in bed, you're trying to sleep, you got a full day of work ahead of you, and you hear, Samuel. I mean, that's going to be scary for anyone, never mind a young boy. And it made me pause, because that's happened to me. And I'm sure that's happened to you, right? Where you've woken up or just been walking through your house and you hear Denise.
Yes, it's creepy as hell.
And it is creepy. And I think most of us are like, okay, I'm just going to leave my house now, or I'm going to say a prayer, or I'm going to sage. Well, what Samuel did was he ran to Eli and said, hey, I keep hearing my name being called. And Eli said, well, answer it. Find out what they want. And I loved that response because no one's ever said that to me. Like when I was a kid, if I heard creepy things and I ran to my parents, they would just say, well, tuck in with us, you'll be safe. Nobody ever said, answer the creepy, weird voice calling out to you. But Samuel did. He said, speak, Lord, for thy servant hears you. And so God spoke to him and prophesied that Eli and Eli's sons would soon face danger, which actually did come to pass. So Samuel eventually ended up working with King Saul and was kind of like his, you have court jesters. Well, apparently back then you had court psychics and mediums. Joseph, for example, Most of us know him as Joseph of the Many-Colored Coat. He was a prophet and a psychic for the Pharaoh, but Samuel worked for King Saul as his little psychic. And what's interesting too, Denise, King Saul used a divination device. It's called Urim or Urim, Urim, and Thummim, Thummim. And ancient scholars debate still what these divination devices were. A lot of people agree they were some type of throwing of the lots, kind of like the I Ching. But King Saul definitely relied on his boy medium, Samuel, and he definitely used these divination devices. When Samuel died, something happened to King Saul. He kind of shut down, and he ended up banishing all mediums and psychics and sorcerers out of the land and had his soldiers drive them all out. Then he's facing this big battle, and he really wants to know what the heck's going to happen. And he's wishing there was a medium he could talk to, because he knows if I could just talk to Samuel, I would be prepared for this battle. So he asks his men, I know I told you to get all the mediums and psychics out of the land, but do you think there's any left? And the men said, well, yeah, there's this woman, they call her the Witch of Endor. She supposedly still practices. So Samuel has threatened to kill, any mediums left in the land, so he doesn't want to scare this lady. So he disguises himself and goes to her. But she's a medium, so she knows. And he promises that he won't harm her if she connects to Samuel. She does. And I'm sure you all know he warns that if King Saul goes forward, he will be defeated, which he is terribly. Now, that story is used so often to talk about, how later in the Bible it says, thou shalt not suffer a witch to live, which has been hotly debated. If you just Google King James Version, you'll understand why that sentence is hotly debated. But if you read the story for what it is, she was a very kind, good woman who did good work and did exactly what was asked of her. But shortly after the Bible was created and put together and agreed on, and remember that there are so many books that were divinely inspired and that were left out of the Bible on purpose to keep us in the dark. This is why Gnosticism started, was to remind us that the knowledge is within us and that so much power of our own inner knowing was purposely left out of the Bible. And so then we entered the Dark Ages, and we had the Inquisition, and we had the Malleus Maleficarum written. And a lot of people who did this work had to go into hiding. In the 17th century, though, we had this wonderful man named Emanuel Swedenborg, who was a renowned scientist. When he's 55, think about that. You're living in the 1600s where the average lifespan for a man was 40. He's 55, and suddenly all these angels start visiting him and talking to him. He turned the tide quite a bit because he only brought through positive and happy messages. He did write a book called Heaven and Hell, but it was a positive book about how if you're just a good person, guess what? Good things are going to happen for you. And so he started to turn the tide a little bit to our thinking. We had Franz Mesmer, who introduced mesmerism to us, which led to hypnotism, which led to a more in-depth investigation into meditation. We had a man named Andrew Jackson Davis, who was called the Poughkeepsie Seer. Then we go into the 1800s, into the 19th century, and we have the Fox sisters, who were famous for beginning spiritualism in America, which later spread to England. And the Fox sisters claimed that a man that was killed in that home and was haunting that home was speaking to them through raps and knocks. Now, two things that are really interesting about the Fox sisters that isn't mentioned if you do like a standard Wikipedia search. What most people will tell you is that the Fox sisters later recounted their story and said it was all a hoax and that one of the sisters could crack her toes really well. Well, Denise, I don't know about you, but my sister can crack her toes really well. Yes, we sisters have lots of talents. And I remember learning that these Fox sisters claimed that they could crack their toes really well. And I remember thinking about my sister cracking her toes and thinking, that doesn't make sense, because the Fox sisters would travel the country, and these raps and apports knocks would happen wherever they went. And this is before microphones, and people throughout the auditorium would hear it. Now, if you're sitting next to my sister, you can hear her toe cracking, but you're not going to hear it in the 25th row behind the stage.
I mean, it would sound similar, but there's a big difference between a rap, a knock, and a toe crack.
Exactly. So the real story, one of the Fox sisters was abandoned by her husband and had this terrible heartache and ended up turning to drink and became an alcoholic. And at the end of her life, she was broke and in debt and suffering the way a lifelong alcoholic suffers. And this man came to her and said, I will give you all this money if you promise to say it was a hoax. And she agreed. On her deathbed, she recanted that hoax and told people, I was paid to say this. But that got buried for a long time. Nevertheless, spiritualism had already taken root. You got to remember, they started hearing these knocks in 1848. Oh, I forgot to mention, when they did some renovations on the house years and years after the Fox sisters lived there, they found a skeleton in the home of a man that had been killed there.
Ooh.
Yeah, which I think is pretty cool. So this first started in 1848, which means that not even 2 decades later, we're in the throes of the Civil War. And one thing I think it's important to remember is that more men died in the Civil War in America than World War I and II combined for American soldiers. I'm not talking about everyone in World War I and II. So that's a lot of people who died. And that is always going to spur spiritualism on, because when an entire country is grieving, they want to know, where is my son? Where is my husband? Where is my father? And so spiritualism really took root in America. It flourished in England, especially after World War I, where 12% of every English man was killed in that war, never returning home. And since then, spiritualism has grown and grown and grown, and now it is a validated, recognized religion in many parts of the world, but especially, I would think, England. And it's here in America too, but not as prominently or as respected or accepted as it is in England. Would you agree with that?
I would. And it's interesting that here in Maine we have 3 spiritualist camps, and we have 2 or 3 spiritualist churches that are quite significant. But the camps have been there since the late 1800s, early 1900s, and the same old buildings, and it's amazing that every summer, and they have mediums come from all over the world, all over the country, that do a week of service at these camps. So it's interesting to me, and I know Lilydale is like the end all and be all. Have you been to Lilydale in New York?
I have not. I've wanted to.
Me too, because that's a lot the same thing, only on a bigger scale. So just the fact that it has stayed, it's never completely faded out. There's always been a continuation of it. And I think St. Augustine, Florida is a big area as well for spiritualism.
Yeah, it's definitely still around. Now, after World War II, we had famous mediums like Arthur Ford come to light. And then we had the whole channeling mediums like Ruth Montgomery. We had the Institute at Duke University who studied psychic ability and mediumship, which then led the government to studying psychics and mediumship, which gave us remote viewing and lots of scientific data that this stuff actually does work. In the 80s, thankfully, we had Shirley MacLaine and then James Van Praagh, who I think were instrumental in bringing this to the forefront of the 20th century. In the 90s, we had John Edward and John Holland come forward and George Anderson. And now it's become not mainstream, but more recognized and accepted. We have wonderful TV shows like the Hollywood Medium. Is it the Hollywood Medium? That Tyler guy, he's so adorable. I love him.
I'm not sure.
Do you know, he's this really, really young kid. I think he's got a show on like E Entertainment or something. We had Monica the Medium, we had the Long Island Medium, we had Crossing Over with John Edward, we had the Rescue Mediums. So a lot of TV shows that started to show people that this is a legit thing and that nothing but good comes of this. And so I think it is growing, and I just don't think it's ever going away. We have the Windbridge Institute, headed up by Dr. Julie Bichelle, which did one of the most profound and groundbreaking studies of mediumship ever done before. And so it is gaining prominence in terms of being an authentic way to connect with our loved ones on the other side.
And the different types of mediums. When you were just talking about all these people who have stepped forward, and I think that if you're a budding medium, you're a practicing medium, if you, whatever it may be, if you have a lineage of this, we've talked about this before, but in my view, my own humble opinion, I think it's so important not to compare where you are with someone else. That we all do it in our own way, and it doesn't make one way better than another. So if you're idolizing or comparing yourself to one of these people who are very, out in the public eye, it doesn't, does that resonate for you as well, as far as that we have to come from our own place and what our strengths are? Because, and that kind of leads into the different types of mediumship that they are. And once you start to develop this and become more comfortable with it and more confident with it, you really start to hone your skill set and your connection to spirit. And one of these will really take off. Mental mediumship is very, well, I'm going to say common out of the different types. And that's what you and I do as far as really, how would you describe it? I mean, I always look at it as just like an instant connection.
Mental mediumship for me is when I'm doing a reading and I will either hear, see, or sense a message to pass on, and it all happens in my mind.
Yes, telepathic, very much so.
Right.
And it's instantaneous.
And that's why it's called mental.
It's not that you're digging or you're doing probing questions or you're, and I will say that, please don't feed the psychic, please don't feed the medium, because I don't want someone to give me information that will then be, oh, well, I told you this, so that's why you said that. I want it to be coming from spirit. And as John Holland and as you and I have said, and many people say, it comes through us, not from us. Trance mediumship, which would be, the big wig with that would be Edgar Casey, is you completely get the hell out of the way. And they just step out and it comes through. And a lot of times they'll almost look asleep. Or Esther Hicks would be another, wouldn't she?
Well, I think she's considered a channeling medium.
True, because she's still caught. Well, is she cognizant of it, though, when it's happening?
Well, I could be. Here's how I differentiate between the two. Trance mediumship is when you are in a trance or asleep, like Edgar Casey, and messages are coming through from multiple sources, either spirit guides or loved ones on the other side. Channeling mediumship is usually when you connect with one entity on the other side. So like the Seth Speaks Spirit series, she's only speaking to Seth, or Esther Hicks is only speaking to the group of people that call themselves Abraham.
True. But I don't think either one of those are truly, I don't think they remember what comes through until they hear it later on.
I agree. And in that sense, it is trance mediumship.
Right. So I think those closely correlate, except both are being used as a vessel, which makes perfect sense. But with the trance, there usually is, what's the word I want? When you completely shut down physically, you're either asleep or glazed over, or it's almost like being in a petit mal seizure. You just stare into space. You're not really.
Well, that sounds fun. Let's try that.
Do not try this at home. And the physical mediumship is, that's when things physically create, or ectoplasm, or things. I mean, that's a very, very different realm. And have you ever seen that happen? The physical stuff?
No. And I think I would freak out if I did. If I saw something oozing from someone's nose and mouth, I don't know what I would do. John Holland describes his experience I think it's in his latest book, Bridging Two Realms, when he was at a spiritualist church in England and saw face transfiguration,
Right.
which is a type of physical mediumship where the medium's face transfigures into the spirit on the other side they're connecting with.
That's also done with scrying, which is with a mirror, and they'll go into like a blackened booth, and there's a mirror, and then a face will appear. That's another old spiritualist church thing, and it's similar to the transfiguration, but it shows up, and it's very unsettling because, and there's so many different techniques that, well, based on what you've said with the history and where we are now, there has always been this desire, this connection, this need to know that there's more, that there's a continuation of life, that our people, our pets, our loved ones are all okay. And I've always thought about it when people say, oh, how can you do that? I always think that it's instinctual. I really, truly believe psychic, mediumship, intuition, we're just accessing that very similar to when we've talked about animals will just stop and stare at spirit. And you and I, we can sense that spirit in the corner and we know there's someone there. And the dogs or cats or whatever animal will know they're there. So as I'm going to go to the science side of my brain, as mammals, wouldn't we be accessing a similar place in our brain?
Mm-hmm.
Which I love, because then it makes it everybody can do it. It's not that you or I or John Holland or anyone that does this is any different. They just happen into that same place in the brain.
That is one of my biggest pet peeves with this, especially that phrase that so many famous mediums say. Psychics are mediums are born, psychics are made.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like that. I really believe that every single person has the ability to connect with their loved one on the other side. That's my second pet peeve. I hate that the minute my best friend dies, I have to call him discarnate or a spirit.
I don't
like that. No. He's still George to me. And I wish we could come up with a better name. Have you come up with a better name?
I haven't come up with a better name, but I was doing a reading a few weeks ago, and I was using present tense for the person that was in spirit. And the person I was doing the reading with was just a little, not hesitant, I'm going to use that word, as far as, is this real? Is this true? And she finally said, you keep using present tense. And I said, well, to me, it is present tense. She's still as alive as she's ever been. She's just not carbon-based. She's not on the planet right now, or she's on a different energetic plane. But to me, she's still very much alive. Or how could I bring her through? How could I bring through these characteristics and this energy? So I agree. I think it causes too much of a separation. And I just don't want anyone to think that's listening to this that we're doing anything magical, or that we can all do this. And I truly, truly believe that.
I do too. And I think the reason why, as a consciousness, we had to experience trance mediumship and physical mediumship and channeling mediumship, and direct voice mediumship. If you guys haven't heard of direct voice mediumship, please, when you have a moment today, go to Leslie Flint's website. He was a medium from England in the 20th century, and you can hear many of his direct voice recordings. When he was bringing through spirit, he would speak in their voice, not his. And, they say seeing is believing. Well, I'm telling you, if you go to his website, hearing is believing. I think the reason why we had to, as a consciousness, see ectoplasm oozing out of someone, or see Edgar Casey go into a trance and bring through messages on how to heal someone, was because as a evolved consciousness, we were not ready to accept this. After going through the Dark Ages and the Inquisition and the Enlightenment and the Age of Science, and then the age of industrialization, and now the age of technology, we just weren't ready to accept that each and every human being has this ability. But now many of us are. And I think that's why mental mediumship is the most pronounced type of mediumship you see today in the 21st century.
I agree.
We don't need, I told you I just finished Dean Radin's book, Magic is Real.
Mm-hmm.
And I am recommending it, but I have to tell you all, it's a science book. So if you're like me, reading charts and placebos and double-blinded, I loved the book. I just don't have a very sciencey mind. But one of the things that he says in that book is that we have to prepare our minds to conceive of how powerful we are. And until we can each individually conceive of the miracles that our mind can perform and do, we won't wake up as a consciousness. And so I feel like there's a very small but growing percentage of us who are waking up, and we are ready to accept this and experience this and live this for ourselves. Which leads us to our little happy announcement. Denise and I are going to be teaching a webinar on mediumship for 4 Thursdays starting on July 12th in the evening. And we're going to be walking you through a lot of this, the history of mediumship, for example, but also the different types of mediumship. And each week that we do this webinar, you will have an exercise to work on just for yourself, for your own growth and development. And each week you'll be partnered up with someone new from the class, and you'll have an opportunity to practice mediumship with that partner. And then every Thursday evening, we'll meet face-to-face on the webinar, and we're going to do a class exercise in the group. So you'll get lots of experience practicing this. You'll get to practice it on your own, one-on-one with a partner, and in a group class setting.
And we have jam-packed a lot into 4 weeks. So it's not dry. It's very, very interactive. Oh my gosh, I really am a medium. I'm already doing that. Or if you're just fascinated with this would be an excellent, excellent entry point.
Yes. The only thing I do want to say is this is not for the newbie to psychic stuff. Like, we are going to start this class assuming that you know your chakras.
Right.
Assuming that you know what clairsentience and clairaudience and clairvoyance means. So this is more for someone who has been on this path for a bit and just wants to push it further and deeper.
You are looking for a course, and this is a shameless plug for you, but I'm going to do it anyway, is Samantha's, your psychic class that you offer online or as a webinar would be an excellent, excellent precursor to this.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, you cover the basics, and it's wonderful. It's well done. You're welcome.
Yeah, and this webinar, we're just going to take it a lot deeper. We're going to do it Thursday nights, starting July 12th, from 8 to 9:30 p.m. Eastern, and we are going to do it during the day as well. I think we're thinking about doing it Friday, starting July 27th. We're debating Fridays or maybe Sunday afternoons, but we're thinking Fridays, right?
Right.
Do you want to talk about your daytime idea? Because I think it's a good thing to offer something during the day.
Well, I just feel that because of the time differences, and a lot of folks aren't night people, so here on the East Coast, we'll be offering this at 8 to 9:30 p.m. But if we could offer it during the day for folks who may have children or may work nights or may not be night people, so we're trying to reach both with that. I think that's incredibly important. So we want to make sure that whoever is interested in doing this would have the opportunity to be a part of it.
Yes. So you can find all that information on our Facebook page, Enlightened Empaths, and you can sign up for it on my website. I think we're doing the night one on my website, SamanthaFaye.com, and the day one on yours,
Right.
thegratefulmessenger.com. And in the webinar, we're going to go over making and holding a link to the other side. I think that's really important because sometimes you can make a link to the other side, but holding it is a whole nother thing. It's like, I equate it to exercise. Like, I can do 5 push-ups, but can I do 10? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
That takes a lot of strength and training. And so for me, I'm sure there are many people listening out here going, I do 100 a day. But anyway, so making and holding a link to the other side. We're going to talk about connecting to your team. We're going to give you exercises and meditations to help you connect with your spirit guide and your angels. I have found in my experience of teaching, Denise, that some people have an affinity for connecting to guides and angels, and some people have an instinct talent for connecting to humans, to loved ones on the other side. And
Yes.
some have a talent for doing both. But I think it's great to take classes like this so that you can figure out what is your strength. And instead of, like you were saying so beautifully before, instead of comparing yourself and saying, oh, I'll never be that good, focus on your strength and hone in on that. Like I always used to watch John Edwards Crossing Over, and I stopped watching his show after several years because I would turn the TV off and go, oh, I'll never do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, Samantha, stop talking to yourself like that. Somehow you just broke through all the dimensions and brought through a really wonderful message for this client. So shut the hell up and just pat yourself on the back and move on.
And that's another, we've done this a long time, or for anyone that's listening that you've done this, you're a medium, but for me, I'm going to just use a personal experience, and I don't mean this ego-based, and I hope it doesn't sound that way. I'm very clairvoyant. I see things, but the clairaudience has improved, the clairsentience has improved, and now it's to the point where I'll feel things physically when I'm talking, like, oh, is your lower back bothering you? So it's progressive, and we're going to talk a lot about which are you clairaudient, clairvoyant, which is your strength, but also how to develop and improve the other clairs as well. Have you found that as well, that it's been progressive for you with more information coming in?
Yes. Well, again, going back to my push-up exercise, if you do push-ups every day, yes, you strengthen your arms, but guess what? You also strengthen your back and your core. And so I think it's the same. If you strengthen your clairvoyance, which is your natural strength anyway, the other clairs are going to get strengthened too. And you can only do it through exercise and practice. You can only read so much. At some point, you've got to figure out how to do it. And that's what this webinar does. We're also going to talk about how to raise your vibrations, because that's the key to this. Yes. The word medium is a very literal word. When you are connecting to spirit, you are the medium between the world of the discarnates or the spirits and the world of us here in this third dimension. You are the medium, the link, the connection. And the only way you can be that medium is to raise your vibrations so that you can get closer to that other dimension and bring in that message. We're also going to do a whole week on creating your spiritual vocabulary, learning how the world of spirit talks to you through symbols, memories, and signs. And I think that's going to be a really fun week. And you're going to do some exercises based on your shamanism and dream work.
Right, shamanism and dream work, because that's all interconnected. How to create ritual, because that's, for myself, for many people that do this work, that's an incredibly important part, is to learn and develop your own rituals, to open up to spirit, to shut down, to make the connection, to hold the link. I think ritual work is really, really important. And it's not like woo-woo stuff. It's just very basic skills that you can use and then fine-tune for your own use. We're also going to talk about the ethics and some intro stuff about if you truly wanted to make this a business. We'll be doing that towards the end of the course, of all the little things. It's really easy to say, oh, I want to do readings for people because I love it. But there's another side to that I'd love to touch base with as well, just a little blurb during the course.
Definitely. And we're going to talk about how to find your path as a medium. What do you want to do with this?
Right.
Do you want to do readings? Do you want to do healings? Do you want to do grief counseling? Do you want to work with parents who have lost their children? Do you want to work with police on missing persons cases or cold cases? What do you want to do with this ability? Do you just want to experience it and research it? Do you just want to use it to connect with your own loved ones on the other side? So we're going to talk about finding your path as a medium. And we're also going to touch on diminishing the ego, learning to step aside and get out of the way which I think is one of the hardest things a medium needs to learn. And when I say ego, I don't mean like, look at me, look at what I'm doing.
No.
I'm also talking about the shadow side of the ego, which is more damaging to the medium, which is, who the hell am I to do this? Am I really passing this on? The minute you start to ask yourself those questions, that link we talked about that you have to create to the other side is gone.
It's severed, right? And it becomes it goes back to what we said a few minutes ago. It's coming from you, not through you. So if you're,
Yeah.
and just the little things that have those in spirit, those in the angelic realm, those in shamanic work, they'll use your base of knowledge. And it doesn't matter what clear you're operating from. And that's it. I think the number one thing for me, and I'm really excited to be doing this with you, Samantha, is for all those folks that just need to know, oh my gosh, I'm not crazy. This is real. I am connecting with spirit. And if you're at the point where you're interested in taking this class, you already know that, I would think. You've had enough. Is that fair to say?
Definitely. Definitely. And you all know me. I'm going to talk about some spooky stuff because I think you have to. So we're going to touch on psychic protection and setting your boundaries. And that's part of that ritual you were talking about. It's so important to say a prayer for protection, for opening, for validation, and kind of set up your rules with your team on the other side. This is what I will do. This is what I won't do. Like, one of the things I think you're much more comfortable doing in readings that I am not comfortable with is medical intuition. I don't like getting information about illness and sicknesses coming or that have come. Maybe it's my own experience dealing with that scary health stuff, but I don't want to go there.
Right.
And so I've told my guides, I don't want stuff like that to come through.
Mm-hmm.
I've had to tell my guides, I don't want anybody that has not gone through God's divine light of love and protection to come through. Mm-hmm. So I don't want to connect with ghosts. I don't want to connect with any other entities or weirdnesses. I don't want to connect with anyone from the lower astrals. And, maybe one day I'll change that and I will want to be a rescue medium. But right now, with where my life is and my focus on my children and keeping my home safe and cleansed, no, I don't want to go there.
Right.
So we're going to talk about how to set up those rules and boundaries with your team.
Mm-hmm. Very well put.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And so I'm just really excited. I have never taught a full webinar on mediumship. So I, too, am so excited to work with you, Denise. And I'm excited to just see where this will take us. You and I are already talking about doing an advanced mediumship webinar. And so we have outlines of notes for that. But the way I work, and Denise, I think the way you work too, as a traditional teacher and a spiritual teacher, is I take my cues from you, as our beloved John Holland says. And so I like to take what the students tell me in a class, and then form another class out of that.
Yes. Because this is, again, it's not about us. It's how can we share our base of knowledge and our research with you as a stepping off point to further your own development and interest in this field.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the way it'll work is what we're thinking of doing is I'll talk for 15 to 20 minutes. Denise will talk for 15 to 20 minutes. Then there'll be a time for questions and sharing. And then we're going to do a class exercise. And then, so Thursday night we'll meet and do that outline that I just shared. Friday morning, you'll get an email with all the next week's handouts, and then you'll get another email setting you up with your partner. If you take the class Friday during the day, same thing. You'll get all your emails for the next week's class on Saturday morning, and then you'll get your email setting you up with your partner for that week.
And this is all done through Zoom, so it's really easy. You'll get a link that will be sent to your email. You just click on it. It shoots you right into the webinar. It's a very clean process. Yeah.
And you guys will get to meet my dogs. I swear, Denise, every time I teach a webinar, my dogs like go crazy and they have to sit on my lap. So half the time I'm teaching, I have one dog on my lap and the other's like sleeping on my feet.
Oh, my dogs
Kind
probably
of
won't
annoying.
attend, but they may. We don't know yet.
We're not sure if they're open to being a medium just yet, but they're
Right.
working on it. So anyway, oh, and each week you'll also get a reading list, not of books that you have to read, but just suggested books on the topic that we're discussing each week. I always tell my class when I do webinars, my goal is to make this fun. This isn't like,
Yes.
oh man, I didn't do my homework for that class I signed up for. I always want this to be fun, enjoyable, something that you can't wait for. My only demand is that if you are signed up with a partner, you've got to do that exercise because that's not fair to that partner.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the only thing I am kind of teacherly and tough about.
Right. That's fair. That's not fair to the person who's waiting on the other. Yes, I agree on 100% on that as well.
Anything else you want to add about our webinar or mediumship?
No, but I'm excited to share this aspect of the work because it's different than the psychic stuff. It's so different to me, and well, we talked about this earlier. Well, you brought it up earlier in this episode. Is just when you can bring through that validation for someone and help them heal. That's an amazing gift. No, I don't like that word gift because we're all doing it, but it's an amazing gift to the person in spirit and to the person who's receiving the message. So.
Yes, it really is. And just in case anyone is listening to this going, well, what the heck is the difference? When you do a psychic reading, you're tuning into the aura or energy of the person you are reading. I mean, that's what it means. You're reading their energy. And so you will pick up on their personality, their hopes, their fears, their dreams, their wishes. You can pick up on stuff like, often you'll get hits that something good is coming up soon with work, or something you need to watch out for with a relationship, or there's going to be a tricky patch with work stuff in the fall that it'll get better before the holidays. That's psychic type stuff where you're picking up things that are in their energy that have to do with the present and the here and now. Whereas mediumship is where you are connecting in with their loved ones that are on the other side and bringing through messages that validate that is indeed their loved one. So it's two very different things. And I do want to say something too. There's a really scary word, at least to me it sounds scary, necromancy. I hate that word.
Yeah, I don't like it either.
Necromancy is when you are specifically asking for a person on the other side to appear or come into a reading. That's all that means. I personally don't like to do that. If I'm reading for someone and I bring through their aunt and they say to me, well, I really just wanted to hear from my dad, I will put out the question to my guides, like, hey, is her dad around? But if he doesn't appear, I don't sit there and wait until her dad shows up. I think that's kind of, I don't know, intrusive or annoying to the spirit world because I don't know what the dad is doing over there. I don't know. Maybe the daughter's not supposed to get a message from her dad at this point. I don't know. But I don't like calling in specific people. Do you?
I actually will. I will if I'll bring through. I always give people the choice. Would you like to see who steps forward? Which most people choose that. And then I'll say, was there someone specific? And if I ask for a first name, that's all I ask. I said, can you tell me the first name? And so say they say it's Bob. So I'll do a mental connection with, Bob, if this is okay to step forward. So I check with them, but I also, if they're willing and able to step forward, they will. So and I learned that in the spiritualist church as well, that using the first name to make the connection. And often, I mean, if they're going to step forward, they'll be right there. And if they're not, they're not. And I will say, I'm sorry, I'm not getting a link with that. So it's still in that highest and best. It's still not something that, and I think I shared this with you before we got on the air, that I had done a reading and a woman's mother stepped forward who she really wasn't excited to talk to, but it did help with some things that needed to be settled for this woman. So That's another thing. If you're having a reading or giving a reading and there's someone that the person doesn't want to connect with or you don't want to connect with, it is okay to cut that link.
Yes.
So it's not me randomly trying to bring in Elvis. It's it's always a connection to the person that I'm working with.
I think that's an important thing to mention too. When you do mediumship, you cannot connect to whoever you want. There has to be a link of love between either you and that person or between that person in spirit and the client or partner you're trying to read.
Mm-hmm.
So you couldn't, unless you're a channeler, you on, TV, in my opinion, you can't connect with Elvis. If Priscilla Presley is sitting in front of me, yes, I could probably connect with Elvis. There has to be that link, that connection, and I think it's important for people to understand that. And oftentimes, I think certain loved ones don't show up because maybe they just aren't ready for that message at that moment. And I think that's important to surrender and accept and accept. And I think that can be really, really hard. Do I have time for one quick story?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I had a really terrific and terrible reading years ago where this man came to see me, and he was completely shrouded in grief. And I tried to read him for 20 minutes, and everything I said, no, 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 20 minutes of no's. And I knew this man really needed this reading, but I also knew that there was so much grief around him, I wasn't going to do it. And so after 20, and I was sweating, and I'm not a sweater. Mm-hmm. And I was drenched in sweat because I was trying so hard to make this link, which again, I'll go over in the webinar. That's a no-no. If you're trying too hard, you're going to squeeze that energy. But I wanted to make this connection for this grieving man so badly. And finally, after 20 minutes, I just stood up and I said, I am so sorry, sir. I don't think I'm going to be able to make the connection you need today. And this tall, debonair, successful, incredibly smart man broke down into tears.
Oh.
And when he sat at my table crying, I could see the walls of grief go down. And I said, September, did you lose someone in September? And he said, yes. And for the next hour and a half, everything that came out of his mouth was yes. And I was finally able to connect with his son. But it wasn't until he cried that I could get in. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. Wanting, something so minutely specific from the person in order to validate, you have to be open-minded, and as you're learning this as a skill set, that a hit is a hit, and you have to be able to. I think that's a huge part of what we're going to do is teaching you how to recognize the hits, that things that you might just take for granted. Oh yeah, I just kind of know that it's probably a hit. And the confidence, the practice, that there's nothing that can replace that in my book. That it's just a matter of doing this thousands of times that it comes with more ease. So
well, I said I got nothing but yeses from him for the next hour. Not necessarily true. I had to work for those yeses because of what you just said, that minute specific detail people are looking for. I'll never forget, I said to him, did you and your son fly planes together? And he said, no. And I said, he keeps showing me this small plane. And he said, no, we never flew planes. Well, the way it works for me with mediumship, my guides are such pains in my ass. Because they will not, because they will not give me a new image to pass on until I have validated and figured out that message they gave me.
Wow.
And it's really frustrating, and I'm sure it's frustrating for the person sitting across from me. And so I said, I don't know what to do because he keeps showing me this plane, which means I'm not getting it correctly. And he said, well, I own a plane, but I pay someone to fly it. I was like,
fly together. I'm sure the kid was on the plane with him at one point.
I know. I'm like, and did you and your son fly different places in this plane? And he said, well, yeah. I said, okay, I think that's what he's talking about. It was so frustrating. I remember I said to him, did your wife do something with white roses. I'm just seeing white roses going into like a creek or a river. And he said no. And that's a really specific image,
That's
right?
very
Like white
specific.
roses
Right.
going into water. And again, I'm just seeing these white flowers floating down this water. And I'm like, well, I don't know what to do because he keeps showing me these white. And he goes, well, they're white tulips.
For you to have said white roses, because that's what you got, a lot of people that I'm going to be really blunt for a minute, who are covering their ass, they're going to say, I see white flowers. So instead of making it specific, but you and I, we go with the rule that we say what they show us. And sometimes I will say, this makes absolutely no sense, but they're showing me a blank. And it either resonates for the person or it doesn't, or it's a stepping off point to making a connection for the person. And I can't think of a specific example right now, but a few days ago I did a reading, and it was one of those little stepping stone things that they showed me something that led to something else for the person, and then we got to what the meaning was behind the image that they sent. So it's cryptic. If you love puzzles, you love mediumship, because it's all cryptic.
Isn't that true?
And it's figuring stuff out. And what I love, though, is that they'll pick the signs. They'll pick the signs that resonate with your base of knowledge or your experience, and some of them, I mean, I've shared this, if I'm working with someone who's highly creative, for some reason I see a dam, a beaver dam, a dam on a river, and how much water is flowing over the river. I have no idea in hell why they chose to give me that. I get the flow of creativity, I get that, but I don't know why, but it's always been my sign for that.
Is it the sign for blocked creativity?
It can be. If it's blocked creativity, a lot of times I'll see the person like unable to get to the water, or very little water trickling over the dam, or I'll see like a plexiglass wall that they can't get to the water.
Interesting. A lot of times what my guides do is they'll use my memories.
Right.
And then I'll know what they're trying to say. And I have one memory that comes up again and again in readings that nobody has ever validated.
Wow.
My dad, after church on Sundays, would take me to Dr. Mike's ice cream in Connecticut. If you live in Connecticut, it's the best damn ice cream. Anyway, and often if I'm connecting a client to his or her father, I'll see my dad and I walking up those steps to Dr. Mike. And I'll say, did you have like a ritual or tradition with your dad every week where you guys went to get ice cream or went to have brunch? Or no. It's the only image I can't validate. And now when I see it, I go clear, cancel, erase, delete. And I just tell my guys no, because I can't figure that one out. It's the only thing. It's very frustrating.
See, I would go a completely different way with that, as far as, was that a really special and unique time for you and your dad?
Yes.
And that's a precious memory for you?
Yes.
So I'm wondering if that's your guide's way of saying, did you have a really close bond with your dad where you felt this is about a memory of feeling very loved and safe and cherished and time alone? I mean, I'm wondering if they're going more the empath, emotional feeling side of it.
Yeah, maybe so. But my guide should know me by now. Like, I don't... Because really, like, the one thing I don't want to say to somebody is, your dad really left you. Because really, like, 95% of dads love their kids. Yeah, there's that 5% who don't. Yes. But, you know, I hate passing on crap like that. You really miss your dad. No, Sherlock, I'm sitting in front of you because I don't miss him. You know, so I just feel like by now my guide should know me better, and that's a bone I have to pick with them. Anyway, in the webinar,
and ask them for more clarity. Show me something
exactly. More. Show me something different. Do your job, people on the other side. So we're going to talk about how to make sense of the signs and images and symbols that you see and how they work with you to get that message across. And the main thing I want to get across is what you've said several times in this hour, is that we all can do this. Mm-hmm. And our goal of this webinar is just teaching you how to do this. So we're not going to waste time explaining that, yes, you can do this. We're just going to kind of dive in and show you, yes, you can do this, and this is how.
Right. And I think it's really important. This isn't just a lecture. This is experiential. This is practice. This is getting to know other people and work with them. And I think you mentioned that you switch out partners. So you'll never work with the same person for the whole 4 weeks. You'll have a different partner throughout. So you get to work with a bunch of different people. You're not limited to just having one person you work with.
Yes. And I always tell my students too, if you get a new partner in week 2, but you really connected with the partner in week 1, send them an email and say, hey, I'm doing week 2's exercise with my partner, but do you want to do an extra one with me? Because this is a special window of opportunity where you're going to be able to safely practice your abilities, and you should take advantage of it.
I'm excited.
All right.
I really am.
I am too. So we hope that you have enjoyed this hour, and we hope that you will consider checking out this webinar if it is something that you are called to do. Next week, we're going to have a really exciting guest on talking about plant empaths and all sorts of great stuff. We're going to be doing our Q&A show. So if you have any questions or stories that you would like to share for our monthly Q&A, you can send them to us at enlightenedempaths@gmail.com, or you can message us on Facebook, Enlightened Empaths. If you get a moment and you like the show, please consider leaving us a review on iTunes so that people can find us. And in the meantime, as always, please don't forget to show up, do great work, and share your light. Have a great week, everyone.
Bye-bye.